International student protests. First of all, my opinion is that students are marching in hopes of extending their work permits. The problem that I have with these students, they're so entitled. They're so entitled, and if before you jump to conclusions and say that, well, human rights, yes, I'm not saying that someone should just go ahead and smack you and they can get away with. No, you do have human rights, but you don't have residence rights. Imagine if someone from any other country in the world went to India, let's say, and after finishing up their studies, they came out in protests saying that we would like to be a resident of India. But this is welcome everybody. Welcome back to Canadian CF, my YouTube channel for all things Canadian and travel related. This is the channel that you must watch. Now, I do cover a lot of unique travel experiences on this channel, so if you're interested in those, make sure to like and subscribe. The topic for today's discussion, though, is going to be something that is not travel related. Well, it could be travel-esque, I guess. There's a bit of an element of travel that is involved in this discussion, but it's nothing to do about going to a cool place and visiting that place and experiencing that place for what it is. No, this particular, discussion of today is about something that is very close and very near and dear to my heart, and that is the topic of this current issue of protests, student protests in Canada, and that's something that we will discuss in this particular vlog. So if you're interested in learning about this episode of student protests in Canada, well then keep watching till the end, because I'm going to be discussing a lot of interesting, controversial viewpoints about this issue. Now, I'm sure you've heard of this. In fact, I was reading this report earlier about student protests in Canada, and these are students that are protesting for the right to stay and work in Canada. I believe that's what the protest was all about. Students. Yep, so there's an article here, and I've read quite a few of these articles. Immigration protesters, and this is from the CBC article dated June 19, 2024. Immigration protesters march in downtown Charlottetown as new hunger strike begins. So apparently some international students are not happy about the fact that their work permits might be coming to an end and they might have to leave the country. And what's interesting in this whole episode is the fact that students are marching in hopes of extending their work permits and eventually becoming permanent residents. Apparently students feel that they have been wronged and that their laws have been changed, and they should have kept the concerns of the international students in mind. The fact that the provincial government acts on its own is of no importance, but that the provincial government should be caring more about the international students than the actual laws that help the province of Prince Edward Island. Now, here's the problem that I have with this protest, with any of these international student protests. First of all, my opinion is international students have no rights in regards to protesting about their status in the country, because guess what? When they sign up for a standard student work permit, they're mentioning the fact that, and they're telling on their statements, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're telling on their statements that once their studies are completed, they're going to go back to the country, or to their country of origin, whichever country they have a permanent residence in. Now, the fact that they're ignoring this part of the statement is the fact that they weren't intending on completing their studies and going back. And somewhere down the line of command, or I should say somewhere in the communication chain, something was mentioned which led them to believe that they could stay here. Now, most of these students, these international students, almost all of them, as part of the research that I've done, are from India. And this video is not about racism. This video is not about Indians. I love India. Indian culture is great. It has given so much to this world. There's an ancient civilization. And let's not even get into the history part of what India, what India is, how ancient, how civilized, how I should say rich and full of history and contributions the Indian civilization is. We're not talking about the civilization. We're not talking about, this has nothing to do with Indian students. This would be the statement that I give irrespective of whoever the nationality is. If it was, any other nationality, the matter of principle here is that international students, no matter where they come from, are not owed permanent residency in this country. And this is the problem that I have with these students. They're so entitled. They're so entitled. And if before you jump to conclusions and say that, well, what do you know about international students? You've never been one. I was an international student in the United States of America, down south of Canada. And once my studies got completed, I returned back. I did not stay in the country. I didn't overstay. And I did a bachelor's there, I did a master's degree there, and I know what students go through. Tuition fees, all of that. We've been through all of that. International students go through all of that. But what you need to remember is, as international students, you have no rights in the country where you're going to study. You do have human rights. Yes, I'm not saying that someone should just go ahead and smack you and they can get away with it. No, you do have human rights, but you don't have residence rights. Imagine if someone from any other country in the world went to India, let's say, and after finishing up their studies, they came out in protests saying that we would like to be a resident of India. But this is a right. It's not a right. It's a privilege. Citizenship, it's a privilege. Permanent residence, it's a privilege. It's incumbent upon the country to decide who they want to give the citizenship to. It's their country, it's their laws, plain simple. And this is why this was boggling me so much, is when I saw these protests, and I saw a lot of people covering these protests, and people who were covering these protests, some of them were trying to, get the students' side of things, and all I heard from and you saw some political statements, and again, I don't want to go into the political side because I don't believe that there is a political side to this. I believe it's a very clear-cut thing here, and that is the fact that if you are an international student, you're admitting on your standard student work permit that you're coming here to study and that you intend to go back. So, and when you come here and you decide, hey, I can go ahead and protest because it's my right to get citizenship, well then you, my friend, as an international student, have just lied on your work permit, and that's or on your student entry permit, I should say, or a student permit, and you shouldn't be allowed to stay in the country because lying on a government on any government document is considered, I don't know what laws are, but I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good. So there you go. That's my take on this whole international student protests. I was seeing this because I was an international student at one point. Just remember, if you were doing this in the United States or any other country, and you protested the government of that country, they wouldn't be as considerate as the Canadian government, which is still listening to your demands and still trying to, I don't know what they're trying to do, but I hope that if the laws that they have implemented are stuck to, and that they don't give in to these demands just because students are saying we're going to go on a hunger strike. I mean, this is silly. These students are very entitled. You were here to study. Once you're done with your studies, you do have, yes, it's up to the Canadian government. They did change the laws and make some temporary residence, permanent residence earlier. That was based on their needs. The Canadian government is allowed to do what it wants for the betterment of this country. The citizens and the residents of the country, the permanent residents, come in first. Please, everybody. I mean, it really boils my blood. You can tell that I'm getting agitated because when I was an international student in the United States, I didn't protest that, hey, why is the tuition fees for me as an international student 4 or 5 times more than that of a local student? I didn't protest because I knew what their response would have been. Well, this is our country and you're an international student. You don't have the same rights. You don't pay taxes like the locals do. Your parents haven't been paying taxes in this country as our citizens have. So you're not entitled to the same rights. And I knew that going in. I knew that. We budgeted for that. I mean, it was expensive, but we knew going in that was the deal. And we stuck to it. And when I finished my studies in the United States, I left before my legal residence date had come up. So there was a certain date I had to leave. Before that, I did that. And guess what, international students, before you jump to conclusions and say that, well, you haven't suffered like we have. I have suffered like you have. I stayed in the United States for 9 years. I did my bachelor's there. I did my master's there. I worked legally there. But when the time came and I didn't have an opportunity to stay, I went to the airport and left. And that's it. That was the deal. That's the deal. That's what everyone should think about, is, you know, following the rules of the country that you're going in. So that's my whole take on this international student protest situation. I don't know, there's students that I was reading this article about 70,000 students might get deported this year, or once their work permit ends. I don't know what the exact number is, but a lot of these students, their work permits are ending and they're still demanding that their work permits be extended. And I don't think this is fair to the Canadian citizens and residents who have migrated here legally. It's not fair to them to change laws based on protests of international students. I just don't think that's fair. Write down in the comments what you think about this whole issue. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, bye-bye from Canadian. See ya. And again, if you got offended while watching this video, well, let's just say that I'll be posting a lot more videos about issues that bother people, and I'm all about not offending people, but discussing issues, because if you just don't discuss issues, you don't come up with solutions. And I'm not scared of people calling me racist or whatever. I'm not, I mean, look at me. You know, well, I don't know what racist people look like. I wouldn't know. Just discussing and presenting my opinions here on this channel. And since this is an issue concerning Canada, let me talk about this issue, because I love talking about issues, economic, immigration, anything and everything that is news about Canada. I love discussing that. So that's why I discussed this particular issue. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of this whole topic of international students protesting in Canada to have their work permits extended? Until next time. Bye-bye from Canadian. See ya.